Hey, Revenue Radio, it's Mary Grothe, and I have a guest, and I'm very excited that I have a guest. This is a new season, and we're filming, and I get to do things a little bit different this season. So I'm very excited, and I'm going to welcome Chelsea. We met on LinkedIn, and I don't know how, but I probably in my blind connecting was just finding every revenue leader I could find in Denver. I do that a lot to grow my network. But all of a sudden, LinkedIn, the LinkedIn god said, I think these two people
need to connect.
Yes. And so all of a sudden, all of her stuff is showing in my feed. All of my stuff is showing in her feed. And we're completely aligned in everything, liking a comment. Oh, that's it. We have to get together. So Chelsea, welcome to the show, and tell everybody who are you?
Thank you for having me. I am so excited. When Mary was like, oh, I have a podcast, I'm pretty sure I invited myself onto it. I was like, can I be on it? Because we are just soul sisters aligned. But my name is Chelsea. I work in staffing and marketing. And we focus primarily on marketing in any sort of capacity, whether it be creative, marketing, design. And we really focus on pairing a company with a person, an individual. And that is what we thrive on. And I, as an individual, am just such a connector. And I believe in every aspect of my life that when you have something genuine and true and authentic and it connects, that it's inevitable and it's going to manifest in the most amazing ways.
Yeah.
Hence why I'm here.
Yeah, it's so true. And I know somebody may listen to that and say, well, yeah, isn't that what a recruiting firm does? It places people with companies. But when she's talking about individual and the human, there's an alignment, and it's finding the right fit, which is so important. And one of the pieces that defines a right fit is culture. And when we were initially brainstorming of what are we going to talk about today, there's a recent post and a poll that Chelsea did on LinkedIn that was talking about weighing culture versus comp. And then we saw some pretty surprising results on that. You should go to her LinkedIn to see it. But then we thought, well, do we talk about that? And we're like, no, let's just hit culture between the eyes today, because it is culture in itself is an idea that is not defined. And it is completely up to the person who's in it to determine if it's good or not. It's one of those that a CEO, a leader could absolutely set the tone of a culture, but it's the people within it, how they engage in it, how they perceive it. And it's really, culture's one of those that it's not the intention, it's how it's received. And it's crazy how much focus there is on culture, but I don't think anybody can actually define a culture. So we're going to go on the opposite end of this conversation of what we can define, which is a toxic culture. And we believe that toxic cultures lead to burnout. 100%. And I've been a part of it. I created it.
Yeah.
I'm guilty.
Yes. It's so crazy because in toxic culture, not only do you lead to burnout, but that's when you see turnover. That's when you see your profits drop. Everything is kind of a snowball effect when you have that toxic culture, especially now. You know what's so crazy is I was talking to a few girlfriends of when COVID hit and everyone was working from home. You thought, oh, now I'm going to work less. But in fact, it was kind of the opposite. And everyone worked more than they've ever worked before. And by working so much, we were just building this hole for ourselves that we were sitting in. And we were creating this crazy burnout, working 24/7 for these companies that we weren't passionate about. And that's when you saw the Great Resignation, where people left all of these companies because they were like, this does not serve me. I am completely burnt out. I am driving myself into the ground. And now we see this shift of people being like, all right, I want to work for a company that not only respects me, but respects my time, that has a great culture, that fits, that jives with my daily life. And that's what we're really seeing is people are wanting to still work from home, but they want to work from home in a manageable way that's not going to lead to that burnout that you and I both have experienced.
Well, yeah, and I do it to myself. So I'm going to take full responsibility for it. But I'm going to build on what you just said. When I started this company, I'm conditioned to say 4.5 years ago, but we're only a couple months away from our 5-year anniversary, which is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Crazy. Thank you. But when I started this company, I just thought the only way to be a successful entrepreneur was to grind and hustle. And in fact, that was at the end of 2017. I had just come off of my second stint as a high performing sales rep at a Fortune 1000 company. The culture in a Fortune 1000 sales org is grind, hustle, compete, win. So guess what I did? I built a company with the same thought because as a professional, that's how I grew up. I thought that was the only way to win.
Yeah, that's what we're told, right? We're told the harder you work, the more you work, the longer the hours, the more successful you're going to be. Mm-hmm. And to an extent that may be true, right? Because you did build these amazing sales teams. You did increase revenue. But what did that do to you? What did that do to your family? What did that do to you as just a whole? It not only led you to burnout, but then you stopped doing what you were doing and you completely shifted. So it's like, okay, are you going to take that super fast approach where you just go full steam ahead, you burn out, and then you have this hard stop and then you have to restart? So it's like, how do you build a slow momentum and a growth that's led with passion, with heart, with soul, and something that's actually going to fuel you for the long term instead of these short bursts of like, let's just work 24/7, grind, and then you burn out.
Okay, I have to ask you this question though, because I talked about this with myself on my Destination Remarkable podcast, and I got to get your perspective.
Okay.
So grind and hustle and sprints is what we refer to them because that sounds better than what you just said.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, but we call them sprints. When you're working in a small business, like how we are at House of Revenue, and I know you've worked for companies and in your own where you've had to just sprint and get it done.
Totally.
Is there not, though, a good reward on the other side? That's the part that's hard for me because we can't go and swing our pendulum and be like, grind and hustle. It's the old way of doing it. But trust me, you can get the exact same phenomenal outcome by doing less work and by not putting forth your all and being all in and doing these sprints. I'm okay to have my mind changed, but I sit here and go, I have because I did. Yeah. I have, and the running list is like, holy smokes, everything I have in my life. Isn't that because of the hustle? Now, the challenging sentence is, I believe that for me, what I'm discovering is middle ground is to have a medium where, and that's why I think sprints are okay. But to have a constant sprint, which was like my life for the first 2.5 years of this business when COVID hit and I needed to sleep for 3 months to recover.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Like, isn't grind and hustle in a way good?
Yeah. So listen, I think grind and hustle is amazing. That is what I think you and I can agree on is built into us innately. But I think what it comes down to is the intentionality behind that grind and hustle. If you are grinding and hustling for something that you're passionate about, it's not going to lead to burnout as fast. If you are grinding and hustling for something that you're like, what is the greater good of this? Is there any sort of purpose behind this? Or am I just spinning my wheels over and over again with no really action plan or end in sight? Yeah. So if you have something exactly like what you were saying, where you're grinding and hustling, and not only you have that intentionality, you have that purpose, but there is a goal, I am 100% on board with that. I think those sprints, those intentional sprints are exactly what you need to focus on, but less of the, what you were saying, 24/7 sprint. You can't sprint forever.
No, you can't. So let's talk about it from a CEO's perspective. Even a CRO, as they're building out their revenue organization, because you see a lot more grind and hustle and revenue roles, especially when you get down to salespeople or anybody that's working toward a comp plan, KPIs, metrics, et cetera.
Totally.
But don't worry, I know that there are some like grind and hustlers who work in operations roles and leadership roles. But from a CEO's perspective, one of the biggest challenges that I had when I created a toxic culture was it wasn't just the words coming out of my mouth, it was how I was showing up. And for that, it has way more influence than I think CEOs realize.
Yeah.
I wish the first one in, the last one out. It didn't matter if it was a blizzard with 3 feet of snow. That just means I left at like 4:45 in the morning to get there on time for the workday. I had no mercy for anybody that missed work because they were sick, had to take care of a child, had to drive in the snow or anything, because I was raised professionally to show up no matter what. And I was single through most of those years. So becoming a mom in my early 30s, I had the most amazing support team at home with my mother-in-law and my husband. And because I was the entrepreneur, I just immediately said, well, parenting comes second.
Yeah.
Everyone else can take care of my kid. I got to go do this thing first, which was obviously has been corrected and I know is not right. Like my son is here today, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different now, but I set the tone in just how I was showing up. Also, like I didn't have a lot of mercy for people or grace. And at that point I was a Christian woman, but I was not combining me being a Christian woman and believing in faith and the fruit of the Spirit and being kind and gracious. That wasn't showing up in my leadership because I still had this perception that I was supposed to be this like, you know, but anyway, talking out of one side of my mouth, showing up another way in my actions. So without me even knowing, I had created this toxic culture where people felt like the only way to keep their job was to work as hard as I did and to show up like I did. And so not only was I a workaholic, grinding myself into the ground, neglecting my family, I set the precedence that if you were going to work at my company, you also had to do those things. I was just breeding more of what I was doing.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good.
No, gosh, everything that you're saying, I'm like, oh my, I wish I had a notepad. I'd be writing all these notes down because there's so many things that I want to touch on. We'll start with building. First off, I want to say thank you for being able to admit and say, I created a toxic culture. That is not easy to say because you take on this big burden of like, I did this. And just being able to acknowledge that is huge. And I think very important within any sort of company. But with toxic culture, you are so correct. It comes top down because you have these CEOs. And now I do totally understand that people that create companies, especially within startups, you are working a lot. That's how you get your business started, especially someone who is the founder, who is the CEO. But what it comes down to is that grace, that empathy, and that expectation that you put on your employees. That is what's the biggest toxic culture, I think, miss in the fact that when you are working, let's say, 12, 16-hour days in the office, you see all of your employees, they're like, oh my gosh, I too have to do a 12 to 16-hour day. How am I supposed to keep up with this? I think as long as you set the precedence of, hey, I'm the CEO, this is my job to do this. All I want from you is when you're here to just show up with intention, be purposeful, and do a great job and lead with that grace, that compassion, and build that not toxic culture so that you aren't working 16 hours a day. And then it also, this may come as like a hot topic, but being women in the workplace, we really are seen as, yes, we are nurturers, we are empathetic, but when we show up like that in work, it's almost seen as like a curse because we're like, oh, you're being too emotional, right?
Yeah. So on that note, yes, being too emotional. So I'm a very passionate person. And I can curb it and put that passion into more of a very loving and exciting nature. But then when I'm challenged, triggered, I can't think of any more word, dealing with adversity, I have to be super conscious because that passion turns into fire. And I will say so I recovered from the toxic culture in 2020. I'm actually super proud of how we rebuilt. I think we were one of the few companies that respected a start and end time with going to the work from home. And I think that's because we were so bad on working 24/7 until COVID hit.
Yeah.
That part of our rebuilding and resetting our culture was that we weren't going to do that anymore. I became so intentional about a 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. work schedule and honoring our team members who had kids and significant others and also just as a heads up, one of my former employees who now I know she's listening to this because she told me she loves Revenue Radio. So I know she's listening, but she told me, she was on a podcast, and on the podcast, she said that she, as a single woman with no kids, never set boundaries.
That is me. I'm a single
Yes.
woman with no children. I work all the time. Now, granted, exactly like you, I kind of do it to myself, and I really love what I do. So I'm grateful in that aspect. But it's almost like if you're a woman, you have to put in so much more work to get even slightly the same credibility.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it would be like in a CEO position.
Well, it started off rough. Yeah, but now, like at this point, I've just adopted the I don't give a hoot mentality because I'm whole and right with myself on the value that I provide. And I also know that God has just proven to me that no matter what, even when I falter, he's going to work all the bad into good. And because I have that faith, I know even when I screw up, which by the way, like I'm a human, which means all good intention aside, I'm going to make mistakes. And as a CEO, I'm going to mess up. But it's through that grace and humility. And one thing that I've learned is that if I can extend that to my team, guess what? It comes back.
Yes.
And now we have even more of a transparent mindset. We used to have a middle layer of management. I had the most phenomenal executive team last year when we were at our high point of 28 employees and at a $5 million run rate as a business. Of course, we had to have an executive team because I could not manage that all on my own. And we truly had a remarkable team. But there was friction that occurred in the beginning of the year. And I showed up as the worst version of myself to my two male counterparts. And going back to that fiery passion, I was conflicted and I didn't know how to work through my emotions. And so rather than doing the work I needed to do to be right and to be a great leader, I really allowed myself to show up in the worst way possible. So it's one thing to admit once, like I created a toxic culture, but it's quite another for me to realize that that's probably a quality that's just a part of who I am because of my intensity and because of my passion to doing remarkable work and to being brilliant in business. And so a bad side of me was showing up to work consistently. And that was the slow drip on my executives where they weren't receiving the best version of me. And so I'm creating friction, conflict. They're doing the best that they can to run the company. Well, we had different visions. Like here I am thinking I'm immune to this. But yeah, it's interesting being a woman. It's interesting being a passionate woman. And it's interesting being a young woman. I mean, I'm
passionate
still
woman in business.
Right. Like I'm only 38. And granted, I started this thing in my when I was 34. So there was this whole thing of like, I still felt young.
Yeah, of course.
Now I'm like, wait, I think at 38, you're supposed to be doing things with your life. So it's like changed a little bit, but I'm still learning. I'm still figuring this thing out, but I have absolutely led my team to burnout. And now upon this third time of rebuilding, I've made a commitment to my team. Like we're not doing it anymore. So I broke down the walls and we have full transparency in this company. Everybody knows every penny coming in, every penny going out. They know everything that I'm dealing with because how was I expecting my team to be in an empathetic state with me, with my challenges, if they had no idea what was going on?
Right.
So we're not doing that anymore.
I think that point of transparency is crucial. And just with being in staffing and doing a bunch of research, listening to podcasts, talking to people, what is happening the most, especially with like Gen Z and the millennial generation that's coming into the workforce, that is that big candidate talent pool, that's what they want. They want transparency. They want clarity. If you are transparent in your brand, even if, let's say, someone is working for a company that they don't necessarily think, oh my gosh, this is my biggest dream ever, but they see the transparency, they see that connection, they see that clarity, toxic culture not only goes away, but they're able to connect because they're not seeing you as this surface level person or feel like you're hiding something or feel like you are constantly just being micromanaged or that you're going to get fired because you have transparency, you have clarity, you feel comfortable, you feel confident. So that toxic culture melts inevitably.
I agree. And I want to go back to one thing that you said about you being the single woman and not having boundaries, because I think that we skirted past that really fast. So I want to just dig in on this because toxic culture, like I just went to this route of extreme ownership, admitting as a CEO, even though I'm a faith-based CEO with a huge heart, I make mistakes, but at least I have the awareness to own it. But I am not fully responsible for everyone's well-being in this company and for the culture. Like I can set the precedence and set the tone. You said top down, but I'm going to say it's also bottom up.
Sure.
Because I can't check in with every employee at 6 p.m. and reach out and say, hi, I just want to make sure you're logged off for the evening and you're taking care of yourself and you're doing everything that you need to do.
Right.
Like, so as a single woman, and you are such an achiever, you're so talented, you've got such an amazing track record, but how do you How do you manage it? Because you have to take care of yourself. Like you're
Accountability, for
bringing
sure.
that on yourself. So what are you doing?
Yep.
So you've got a good culture now. You've got an amazing team that you're a part of. They're doing it from the top down. How are you meeting them from the bottom up?
Great question. And I love that challenge of being like, I think it's bottom up as well. And that's exactly what it is. It's that self accountability. Can you be self aware when you're like, I've just worked 12 hours? That's good. Like, I am good. And I think for me, being someone that's a super high achiever that is single, doesn't have kids, doesn't have someone that they have to be accountable for or to, you really have to hold yourself to that standard. It's super hard. It's a daily practice, but you also can't expect, and especially if you're working for a company that's more than 3 people, for your CEO to check in every day and be like, I want to make sure you're okay. And it's funny and we laugh, but it's like sometimes I'm like, I wish they would do that. And I'm like, no, you don't. Because you don't want that handheld. You don't want to feel micromanaged. So how do you change your habits? That's what it comes down to, is it's being self-aware, changing your daily habits, acknowledging, hey, yeah, I am burning out. Let me take an hour or 2 off the workday if you're working 12 hours. Maybe not cutting it drastically in half, because you're going to be like, okay, I just went from 12 to 6 and then you're going to feel like you're not doing anything, right? But maybe go 12 to 10.
Yes.
And then you're going to feel so much better. So to answer your question, bottom up, how do you do it? Honestly, it's a daily practice, daily habit. Can you check in with yourself? Maybe if you're like me, you have a very detailed out calendar that is color coded down to like the hour.
Oh, me too.
Oh, yeah, right? And maybe schedule 30 minutes in that day to go for a walk.
Yes.
Get outside.
Woo.
Grab a coffee.
Yes.
Whatever it is. But do it. Don't be like, oh, I don't have time for that. Yes, you do.
You do have time for it. So that is exactly what my former employee said on the podcast she was on, is that rather than making the cup of coffee and starting to grind in the morning, walk to go get the cup of coffee.
Yes.
Get the outside time. Have the moment. Like, does it really hurt your workday to go walk 5 minutes? No. But that sunshine and that vitamin D and being outside and just having that time to walk and not be in front of a device and set your day in that right tone made all the difference for her. So, and by the way, I agree that a CEO can check in every day and do this, but I will say that we've transformed how we do one-on-ones here, because now it's me and the world, I feel like, because I don't have my big executive team anymore. And so I have biweekly one-on-ones. And when I sit down with team members, I shut down my electronics and I just look them in the eye. I'm like, how are you as a human?
Yes.
What's going on in your life?
It's that purpose.
How
it's that
are you?
intentionality.
It is. Because we have enough meetings throughout the week and we've built great paths of visibility into the data that I need to know and be aware of so I can manage the business. Mm-hmm. But to have a one-on-one where they have to tell me one more time about their business and what they're working on, it's like, did we not just have this meeting on Monday? So when I do get the one-on-one time, like I have a mom that works here. Mm-hmm. She's amazing.
Great.
2 young boys. And I remember the last one, I think we were 15 minutes in and we hadn't spoken anything about work. But you know, it is hard to be a wife, a mom, and a business professional and all of everything that comes with that. And it was amazing to just have camaraderie. Even, I'm the CEO and she's my direct report. Screw all that. Like, it was just amazing to have time with another mom that's passionate about the work that we do, that we can share in the same life. And the fun thing that we were talking about was the opportunity to have hybrid work days so we can have lunch with our sons, and how special that is in the middle of a work day. Like, that's what the one-on-one was. That's good culture, because people actually realize my CEO just spent 15 minutes talking with me about how much we share in the passion and love of having lunch with our sons. You look at me as a CEO in 2019, you would have never heard. If I heard that you had lunch with your kid in 2019, I would be
better
livid.
be working the rest of those hours.
Where are you adding in that 30 minutes that you took away? You're working late then tonight, right? But that was how I was raised. That was my mentality. And I didn't know any better. So I'm thankful for the grace that has come back to me. But anyway, Chelsea, we got to put a bow on this.
Okay.
So last words of wisdom coming from you on this topic.
Last words of wisdom. I think everything that you just said into summation of when you approach your day, your work, your career, your search for a great hire, and you do it with intention, with grace, with purpose, you are going to not only find the perfect hire, the perfect company to work with, the perfect company to work for, but your day is going to feel a lot more in control. So to eliminate that toxic culture, it's being intentional, being purpose driven, and making sure, if you're working a bunch, is it because there's intention behind it? Is it because you are doing it with that purpose and with that idea of no more toxic culture? Let's make sure that we are connecting, we are collaborating, we are in this together. And that's what's going to get you to an amazing place with your company, an amazing rapport with your employees, and an amazing quality of life at the end of the day.
That was so beautifully said. Revenue Radio audience, thank you so much for tuning in today. Chelsea, thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you.